The coffee grew cold in the porcelain cup, forgotten as its owner stared out the rain-streaked window of Meridian, one of the city's most exclusive dining establishments. For Anna Miller, a woman whose weathered hands told stories of 30 years serving tables, this Tuesday evening shift was supposed to be routine. Clear the plates, refill the glasses, smile through the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. But sometimes the universe has different plans. Sometimes a single piece of paper, left carelessly behind on burgundy leather, can unravel the carefully constructed walls we build around our hearts. Susan Pearl moved through the world like a force of nature contained in silk and pearls. At 52, she commanded boardrooms with the same quiet authority that had built her telecommunications empire from a single patent into a global powerhouse worth $12 billion. Her silver hair was swept into an impeccable chignon, her navy dress tailored to perfection, and her grey eyes held the kind of focused intensity that made grown men stammer during merger negotiations. Tonight she had chosen table 7 at Meridian, not for its view of the city's glittering skyline, but for its isolation. Corner tables were sanctuaries for the wealthy, places where vulnerability could be safely contained behind walls of privilege and power. The evening had started like any other high-stakes business dinner. Susan's guest, a nervous venture capitalist named David Chen, had pitched his latest startup with the desperate enthusiasm of a man who knew his reputation hung in the balance. She had listened with practiced patience, her manicured fingers drumming silently against the white tablecloth as he stumbled through projections and market analyses. But her mind was elsewhere, lost in memories that no amount of money could silence or buy back. Anna approached the table with the quiet efficiency of someone who had perfected the art of invisibility. She was 48, with kind brown eyes that had seen too much and hands that bore the calluses of honest work. Her uniform was pressed and clean, but the fabric showed the gentle wear of countless washings. She had worked at Meridian for 7 years, long enough to recognize the difference between old money and new, between those who treated service staff as furniture and those who at least remembered to say, "Please, will there be anything else this evening, Miss Pearl?" Anna asked, her voice soft but clear as she began clearing the dessert plates. David had left 20 minutes earlier, his face flushed with the particular shade of disappointment that came from a declined investment. The rejection had been delivered with Susan's characteristic precision, surgical and final. Susan looked up from her untouched creme brulee, her eyes focusing on Anna's face for perhaps the first time all evening. There was something in that gaze, a flicker of recognition that neither woman understood. "No, thank you. Just the check, please." As Anna retreated toward the kitchen, Susan reached into her Hermes handbag and withdrew a piece of cream-coloured stationery. Her personal letterhead, embossed with the Pearl Holdings logo, felt heavy between her fingers. The letter had been written in her study that morning, each word carved from the raw stone of 25 years of regret. It was a letter she had never intended to send, addressed to someone she had lost the right to contact decades ago. But carrying it with her had become a ritual, a tangible reminder of the choice that had defined her life more than any business decision ever could. The letter began simply, "My dearest Sarah." 2 words that contained the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Sarah Chen, not the nervous venture capitalist who had just left her table, but a woman whose last name had been Miller before marriage, before children, before life had pulled them in opposite directions. Sarah, who had been Susan's college roommate, her closest friend, her secret love, and ultimately, her greatest loss. Susan's fingers trembled slightly as she refolded the letter. The restaurant was nearly empty now, just a few lingering couples and the soft clink of silverware being collected by the wait staff. She placed the letter on the table beside her wine glass and stood, smoothing down her dress with the automatic gesture of someone accustomed to being watched and judged. The check could wait. She needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of her own memories. She walked toward the restroom with measured steps, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Behind her, the letter lay forgotten on the burgundy leather banquette, a cream-coloured rectangle that would change everything. Anna returned to clear table 7 with the mechanical precision of muscle memory. She stacked the plates with practiced efficiency, pocketed the generous tip Susan had left, and began wiping down the table. It was then that she noticed the letter, partially hidden beneath the cloth napkins Susan had left behind. The expensive paper caught the ambient light from the crystal chandelier above, and Anna's trained eye immediately recognized it as something valuable, something personal. Her first instinct was to chase after the departing guest. Wealthy patrons often left behind important items, and returning them was part of the service that kept Meridian's reputation intact. But as Anna picked up the letter, her own name seemed to leap from the page. Not her name exactly, but close enough to stop her breath in her throat. Sarah Miller. Her maiden name written in elegant script across cream-coloured stationery. Anna's hands began to shake as she processed what she was seeing. The name on the letterhead made her heart skip. Susan Pearl, Pearl Holdings International. But it was the first line that made the world tilt on its axis. My dearest Sarah, this wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. Susan Pearl, the billionaire technology mogul, couldn't be Susie, her college roommate from 25 years ago, the girl who had shared her tiny dorm room, who had helped her through organic chemistry, who had held her hand during her father's funeral. The girl who had broken her heart so completely that Anna had never quite learned how to put the pieces back together. The restaurant continued its evening rhythm around her, but Anna felt suspended in time, trapped in a bubble where past and present collided with devastating force. Her legs felt unsteady as she sank into the chair Susan had vacated moments before. The letter felt impossibly heavy in her hands, each word a small explosion in her chest. My dearest Sarah, I know I have no right to write to you after all these years. I know that what I did was unforgivable, and I know that this letter is nothing more than selfish need masquerading as apology. But I cannot stop thinking about you, about us, about the choice I made that destroyed the most precious thing in my life. Anna's vision blurred as tears she had thought long dried spilled down her cheeks. The words continued, each sentence peeling back layers of scar tissue she had spent decades building. Susan wrote about success that felt hollow, about wealth that couldn't fill the void left by love abandoned. She wrote about board meetings where she found herself searching crowds for a familiar face, about charity galas where she donated millions but couldn't buy back a single moment of what they had shared. I chose my family's expectations over my heart, the letter continued. I chose the safety of their approval over the terrifying beauty of loving you. I was 22 and scared, and I convinced myself that what we had was just a phase, something I would outgrow like childhood fears or teenage dreams. I was wrong about everything except one thing. Losing you has been the defining tragedy of my life. The letter went on to describe the path Susan's life had taken after college. The arranged introduction to Robert Pearl, heir to a telecommunications fortune. The wedding that made the society pages but left the bride feeling like an actress playing a role. The successful business partnership that grew into genuine respect but never love. Robert's death from cancer 5 years ago, leaving Susan wealthy beyond measure but utterly alone. I know you married someone else, Susan had written. I know you have children, a life I was too much of a coward to fight for. I'm not writing this letter to disrupt that life or to ask for forgiveness I don't deserve. I'm writing because I need you to know that not a day has passed when I haven't thought of you, when I haven't wondered what might have been if I had been brave enough to choose love over fear. Anna's sobs echoed in the empty restaurant section, drawing concerned glances from the remaining staff. She pressed the letter to her chest, as if it could somehow heal the wound it had reopened. 25 years of wondering, of creating stories to explain Susan's sudden departure from her life, of building walls around her heart to prevent anyone from getting close enough to hurt her that way again. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She'd married, yes, but not for love. She had married David Miller, a kind man who offered stability and asked no difficult questions about her past. She had children because it was expected, because it filled the empty spaces in her life with purpose and distraction. But she had never loved anyone the way she had loved Susan, had never felt that electric connection that made the world seem full of infinite possibility. The letter's final paragraphs revealed details that made Anna's heart ache with recognition. Susan wrote about driving past their old campus, about keeping a photograph from their senior year hidden in her desk drawer, about the recurring dreams where they were still young and brave, and everything was still possible. "If you ever think of me," the letter concluded, "please know that you were the great love of my life. You were the person who taught me what it meant to be truly seen and accepted. Losing you taught me that some mistakes are too large to ever fully heal from. I am sorry, Sarah. I am so desperately, completely sorry." The letter was unsigned, as if Susan couldn't quite bring herself to claim ownership of such raw vulnerability. Anna sat in the growing darkness of the restaurant, Susan's words echoing in her mind like a prayer or a curse. Somewhere in the city, the woman who had written these words was going about her evening, unaware that her most private thoughts had fallen into the hands of their intended recipient. Unaware that Sarah Miller, now Sarah Chen after her divorce 3 years ago, was sitting 20 feet from where she had left her heart exposed on cream-coloured stationery. The weight of coincidence felt too heavy to be accidental. In a city of millions, what were the odds that Susan would choose this restaurant, this table, this particular evening when Anna was working? It felt like the universe conspiring to force a reckoning that both women had spent decades avoiding. Anna looked up to see Miguel, the night manager, approaching with concern etched across his weathered face. "Anna, are you all right? Do you need to go home early tonight?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and shook her head. "I'm fine, Miguel. Just tired. It's been a long day." But as she folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket, Anna knew that everything had changed. The careful equilibrium of her life, built on routine and emotional distance, had been shattered by words written in elegant script. Tomorrow she would have to decide what to do with this unexpected gift of knowledge, this window into Susan's soul that revealed how much their shared past had shaped them both. The question that would keep her awake tonight wasn't whether Susan's words were sincere. The raw pain that bled through every sentence left no doubt about that. The question was whether 25 years of separate lives had created too much distance to bridge, or whether some connections were strong enough to survive even the cruelest tests of time and circumstance. As Anna finished her closing duties and prepared to leave Meridian for the night, she carried with her more than just the usual exhaustion of a long shift. She carried the weight of possibility, the dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, some stories got second chances. The drive home through the city's rain-slicked streets felt endless. Anna's ancient Honda struggled up the hills toward her modest apartment, the engine's laboured breathing a soundtrack to her churning thoughts. The letter in her purse seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, a living thing that had awakened parts of her she thought had died long ago. She found herself checking the rearview mirror obsessively, as if Susan might materialise in the back seat like a ghost from her past. Her apartment building stood in stark contrast to the gleaming towers of downtown, a 3-story structure with peeling paint and a broken security door that never quite closed properly. Anna climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, her legs heavy with exhaustion and emotional overload. The hallway smelled of cooking oil and disappointment, the particular cocktail of scents that mark buildings where dreams came to die quietly. Inside her 1-bedroom apartment, Anna kicked off her work shoes and sank onto the threadbare couch that had been her companion for 8 years. The space was clean but sparse, decorated with thrift store finds and photographs of her 2 children from her failed marriage. Jason, now 22 and living in Portland, rarely called. Emma, 19 and away at community college, texted occasionally, but always seemed to be rushing toward a life that didn't include her mother's complicated past. Anna pulled the letter from her purse and read it again, each word hitting with the same devastating impact as the first time. The elegant handwriting blurred through her tears as memories flooded back with painful clarity. Susan laughing in their cramped dorm room, her hair shorter then, her eyes bright with ambition and mischief. Susan staying up all night to help her prepare for finals, bringing coffee and encouragement in equal measure. Susan's hand finding hers during a late-night conversation about their futures, their dreams, their fears. The moment everything changed. It had been spring of their senior year, that magical time when the world seemed full of infinite possibility. They had been studying in the library, preparing for their respective thesis defences, when Susan had looked up from her economics textbook and said, quite simply, "I think I'm falling in love with you, Sarah." The words had hung in the air between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Anna remembered the kiss that followed, tentative at first, then desperate with the hunger of recognition. They had spent the next 3 months in a bubble of secret joy, stealing moments between classes, meeting in empty lecture halls, whispering their feelings like prayers in the darkness of their shared room. It had been the most alive Anna had ever felt, as if every nerve ending had suddenly awakened to the possibility of real happiness. Then came graduation day, and with it the arrival of Susan's parents, Harrison and Margaret Pearl, old money aristocrats who wore their disapproval like expensive cologne. Anna had watched from across the quad as they enveloped Susan in their world of expectations and social obligations, their voices carrying the weight of generations who had never questioned the prescribed path. The confrontation happened that evening, in the parking lot behind the dormitory. Susan's face was pale, her hands shaking as she spoke words that felt rehearsed, hollow. "This was just college, Sarah. This wasn't real life. I have responsibilities, expectations. My family has plans." "What about our plans?" Anna had whispered, her voice breaking. "We were kids playing house," Susan had replied, but her eyes told a different story. Her eyes begged for forgiveness, even as her mouth delivered the killing blow. "I'm sorry if you thought it was more than that." The next morning, Susan was gone. No forwarding address, no phone number, no explanation beyond the brutal efficiency of her departure. Anna had spent weeks calling every Pearl Holdings office she could find, leaving messages that were never returned. She had written letters that came back marked "Return to Sender." Eventually, she had been forced to accept that Susan had meant every word, that their love had been nothing more than an experiment in rebellion that Susan had decided to abandon. Now, 25 years later, Anna held proof that everything she had believed was a lie. Susan's letter revealed the truth she had been too young and too heartbroken to see, that Susan had been forced to choose between love and survival, between her heart and her family's acceptance. The choice had destroyed them both, but only one of them had known it at the time. Anna's phone buzzed on the coffee table, startling her back to the present. A text from Emma. "Hey Mom, need money for books. Can you Venmo me $200? The mundane request felt surreal against the backdrop of her emotional upheaval. This was her life now, the life she had built on the ruins of her first and only real love. A life of service jobs and financial struggle, of children who saw her as a resource rather than a person, of nights spent alone with memories she had tried so hard to bury. She typed back, "Money's tight this month, honey. Can you wait until next week?" The reply came immediately. "Never mind. I'll ask Dad." The casual dismissal stung, but Anna had grown accustomed to being the parent of last resort, the one who got called when everyone else had said no. Setting her phone aside, Anna walked to her bedroom and opened the small jewellery box on her dresser. Inside, beneath a tangle of costume jewellery and forgotten earrings, lay a small silver locket. She hadn't opened it in years, but her fingers remembered the mechanism. Inside was a tiny photograph from their senior year, both of them laughing at something now forgotten, their faces radiant with youth and possibility. The woman in that photograph felt like a stranger now, someone who had believed in happy endings and the power of love to overcome any obstacle. Anna had been so naive then, so convinced that what she felt for Susan was strong enough to survive anything the world threw at them. The years had taught her differently, had shown her that love was often the first casualty in the war between desire and duty. But Susan's letter changed everything. It revealed that the woman Anna had loved had never stopped existing, had simply been buried beneath layers of obligation and regret. The successful businesswoman who had walked out of Meridian tonight was still at her core, the frightened 22-year-old who had been forced to choose between authenticity and acceptance. Anna closed the locket and returned to the living room, where Susan's letter waited on the coffee table like an unexploded bomb. The smart thing would be to destroy it, to pretend this cosmic coincidence had never happened. She could continue her quiet life of routine and resignation, could avoid the messy complications that came with reopening old wounds. But as she stared at the cream-coloured stationery, Anna realised that some opportunities came only once in a lifetime. Some chances for closure, for truth, for the possibility of healing, arrived wrapped in the most unexpected packages. The universe had conspired to put Susan's confession directly into her hands, and ignoring it would be its own form of cowardice. She thought about the woman who had left that letter behind, probably lying awake in some penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she would ever find the courage to actually send such a raw admission of regret. Susan had no idea that her words had already found their intended recipient, that the great love she had written about with such aching honesty was sitting in a shabby apartment, reading every word through tears of recognition and grief. The clock on her microwave read 1:47 a.m. when Anna finally made her decision. She would not let another 25 years pass in silence and separation. She would not let Susan continue to believe that her choices had been forgotten or forgiven by default. Most importantly, she would not let fear rob her of the chance to finally understand what had really happened to the love that had defined the rest of her life by its absence. Anna pulled out her laptop, a battered machine that took several minutes to boot up, and began to research. Pearl Holdings International had a corporate website with a contact page, but that felt too formal. Too distant for what she needed to say. Social media searches revealed nothing personal. Susan's digital footprint carefully curated to reveal only the public persona of a successful executive. But persistence and determination had always been Anna's strengths, the qualities that had gotten her through single motherhood and financial hardship, and the grinding disappointment of dreams deferred. She scrolled through news articles and business profiles looking for any detail that might provide a more direct path to the woman behind the corporate facade. Finally, in a year-old profile in Fortune magazine, she found what she was looking for. The article mentioned Susan's involvement with the Pearl Foundation, a charitable organisation focused on education initiatives. More importantly, it mentioned that Susan personally reviewed all grant applications, that she believed in the importance of individual stories in understanding broader social issues. Anna opened a new document and began to type, her fingers moving slowly at first, then with increasing confidence as the words found their rhythm. This wouldn't be a letter delivered through corporate channels or filtered through assistants. This would be a grant application, a request for funding for an educational program that didn't exist, submitted by Sarah Chen, former teacher and current restaurant worker, seeking support for adult literacy initiatives. It was a deception, but a necessary one. The real application would be hidden in the personal statement, in the story of why this fictional program mattered so much to its fictional applicant. Between the lines of bureaucratic language and educational jargon, Anna would tell her own story, would reveal that the letter Susan thought was lost had found its way to exactly the right person. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using Susan's own success, her own charitable foundation, as a vehicle for their reunion. The girl who had once been forced to choose money over love would now receive a message of love disguised as a request for money. As dawn broke over the city, painting her small apartment in shades of gold and possibility, Anna finished her letter. It was part grant application, part love letter, part confession of a life lived in the shadow of a single devastating loss. She wrote about the teacher she had been before marriage and motherhood had derailed her career, about the woman she might have become if things had been different, about the love she had carried like a secret torch for 25 years. Most importantly, she wrote about forgiveness, about understanding, about the possibility that some connections were strong enough to survive even the cruelest tests of time and circumstance. She signed it, Sarah Chen, former Sarah Miller, former everything you once meant to me, current keeper of your secrets and guardian of our shared past. The submit button on the Pearl Foundation website seemed to glow with promise as Anna hovered her cursor over it. One click would change everything, would set in motion a chain of events that could lead to healing or heartbreak, to closure or chaos. There would be no taking it back once she pressed send, no pretending that this moment of cosmic intervention had never happened. Anna thought of Susan lying awake in her penthouse, surrounded by all the success that had cost her everything that truly mattered. She thought of the letter that had found its way across time and space to land exactly where it belonged. She thought of the girl they had both been, young and brave and full of dreams that had seemed achievable until the world had taught them otherwise. Most of all, she thought of the possibility that some stories, no matter how badly they ended the first time, deserved a second chance at getting it right. Anna clicked send. The confirmation message appeared on her screen like a small miracle. Your application has been submitted successfully. You will receive a response within 7 business days. 7 days to wonder if she had made the right choice. 7 days for Susan to read between the lines and understand that the past had finally caught up with the present. Anna closed her laptop and walked to the window, watching the city wake up beneath a canopy of grey clouds. Somewhere out there, Susan was probably just getting home from whatever charity event or business dinner had filled her evening. Soon, very soon, she would discover that the letter she thought was lost had found its way to the one person who understood every word, every pause, every ache between the lines. The next few days passed in a haze of nervous energy and second-guessing. Anna found herself checking her email obsessively, jumping every time her phone buzzed, analysing every customer at Meridian for signs that Susan might return looking for her lost letter. Miguel noticed her distraction and asked twice if she needed time off, his weathered face creased with the kind of paternal concern that made Anna's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I'm fine," she told him each time, but they both knew she was lying. Fine people didn't drop plates or forget orders or stare off into the distance while customers waited for their water glasses to be refilled. Fine people didn't check their phones every 10 minutes or jump when the restaurant door chimed. On Wednesday evening, as Anna was wiping down tables after the dinner rush, her phone buzzed with an email notification. Her hands trembled as she opened her personal account, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The sender's name made her breath catch. Susan Pearl, Pearl Foundation. The subject line was simple. Grant application. Immediate review required. Anna's legs gave out and she sank into the nearest chair, her vision tunnelling as she opened the message. The email was brief, professional in tone, but charged with an undercurrent of barely contained emotion that Anna recognised from their college days. Susan had always been careful with words, had always chosen them like weapons or shields depending on the situation. Ms. Chen, thank you for your grant application. Your proposal for adult literacy initiatives has caught my personal attention, particularly your statement about the transformative power of education and second chances. I would like to schedule a meeting to discuss your project in greater detail. Are you available tomorrow evening at 7 p.m? I suggest we meet at Meridian Restaurant on 5th Street, as I believe you may be familiar with the location. Please confirm your availability at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Susan Pearl, President, Pearl Foundation. Anna read the message 3 times before its implications fully sank in. Susan knew. She had read the application, had understood the coded language and hidden meanings, had recognised the name Sarah Chen as easily as Anna had recognised the handwriting on cream-coloured stationery. The suggestion to meet at Meridian was Susan's way of acknowledging that she understood exactly who she was corresponding with. Tomorrow evening, less than 24 hours to prepare for a conversation that had been 25 years in the making. Anna typed back a simple confirmation. 7 p.m. tomorrow works perfectly. I look forward to our meeting. She hesitated before adding, P.S. I believe I have something that belongs to you. The response came within minutes. I believe we both have something that belongs to each other. That night, Anna lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possible scenarios for their reunion. Would Susan be angry about the deception? Would she be embarrassed that her private thoughts had been discovered? Would she deny everything, retreat behind the wall of professional courtesy that successful people use to keep the world at arm's length? Or would she be the Susan that Anna remembered, the girl who had once said that honesty was the only currency that mattered between people who truly cared about each other? Anna had taken a day off at the diner, spending the day in a state of restless preparation. She tried on every outfit she owned twice, settling finally on a simple black dress that was professional enough for a business meeting, but personal enough to acknowledge the truth of what they would really be discussing. She practiced what she might say, then abandoned her rehearsed speeches as artificial and hollow. By 6:30, Anna was sitting at the bar at Meridian, nursing a glass of white wine and trying to calm her racing heart. The restaurant looked different from this angle, more intimate somehow, as if she was seeing it through Susan's eyes rather than her own. The maitre d', a distinguished man named Pierre who had always treated her with polite indifference, seemed puzzled by her presence as a customer rather than staff. "Ms. Chen?" he asked, approaching with the kind of diplomatic smile that suggested he was unsure of protocol. "Ms. Pearl's assistant called. She's running a few minutes late but asked that you be seated at table 7. Table 7, the same corner booth where Susan had sat 3 nights ago, where she had left behind the letter that changed everything." Anna followed Pierre across the restaurant, her legs unsteady beneath her. The familiar weight of serving trays was gone from her hands, replaced by the unfamiliar vulnerability of being served rather than serving. She slid into the banquette where Susan had sat, trying to imagine what the other woman had been thinking as she wrote those devastating words of regret and longing. The view from this angle was different too. The restaurant spread out before her like a stage set, waiting for the most important performance of her life. At 7:03, Susan Pearl walked through the front door of Meridian. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she watched the woman she had once loved navigate the restaurant with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Susan wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Anna made in 3 months, her silver hair styled in a way that suggested both authority and approachability. She was older, obviously, but the years had been kind to her in the way they were kind to people with access to the best of everything. But it was her eyes that stopped Anna's heart. Those same grey eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness across their tiny dorm room, that had held her gaze during their first kiss, that had begged for forgiveness even as their owner's mouth delivered words of rejection. Those eyes found Anna's across the restaurant and held them with an intensity that made the rest of the world fade away. Susan walked toward table 7 with measured steps, her professional composure intact, but her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She slid into the seat across from Anna, the same seat the nervous venture capitalist had occupied 3 nights earlier, and for a moment neither woman spoke. "Sarah," Susan said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Susan," Anna replied, and the simple exchange of names felt like a prayer, like a benediction, like the beginning of something that had been suspended in time for a quarter of a century. They stared at each other across the white tablecloth, 2 middle-aged women carrying the ghosts of the girls they had once been. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, everything that had been lost, everything that might still be possible. "You kept my maiden name," Susan said, her voice stronger now, but still threaded with wonder. "In your application, you signed it Sarah Chen, but you wrote about Sarah Miller." "I kept a lot of things," Anna replied, pulling the silver locket from her purse and placing it on the table between them, "including this." Susan's eyes filled with tears as she recognized the locket, the tiny photograph visible through its open face. "You still have that?" "I still have everything," Anna said, her own voice breaking, "including your letter." She withdrew the cream-coloured stationery from her purse, unfolding it carefully as if it were made of butterfly wings. Susan's face crumpled as she saw her own handwriting, her most private thoughts exposed in the soft light of the restaurant where they had been lost and found. "I never meant for you to read that," Susan whispered. "I never meant for anyone to read that." "But I did read it," Anna said, leaning forward across the table. "And now I need you to know that you were wrong about almost everything you wrote in it." Susan's eyes widened in confusion and hope and fear all at once. "You wrote that losing me was the defining tragedy of your life," Anna continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But Susan, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. You made a choice to break my heart rather than disappoint your parents. You chose their approval over my love, and that choice destroyed us both." The words hung in the air between them, brutal in their honesty, but necessary in their truth. Susan flinched as if she had been slapped, but she didn't look away, didn't retreat behind the armour of professional politeness. "You're right," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was a coward. I was 22 and terrified, and I chose the easy path instead of the right one. I chose security over love, and I've regretted it every day since." "But that's not the part you were wrong about," Anna said, reaching across the table to take Susan's hand. The touch sent electricity through both women, a recognition that transcended time and distance, and all the years that had separated them. Susan's fingers closed around Anna's with desperate intensity. "Then what?" "You wrote that you were sorry, that you didn't deserve forgiveness," Anna said, her voice soft but clear. "But, Susan, I forgave you 25 years ago. I forgave you because I understood even then what it cost you to walk away. I forgave you because I knew that the girl who loved me wouldn't have left unless she felt she had no choice." Susan's sobs echoed in the quiet corner of the restaurant. 25 years of guilt and grief pouring out in waves that she had been holding back through sheer force of will. Anna moved around to the other side of the booth, sliding in beside Susan and pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home after a lifetime of exile. "I thought about you every day," Susan whispered against Anna's shoulder. "I thought about what we could have been, what we should have been. I built an empire, but I could never build a life that felt real without you in it." "I know," Anna murmured, stroking Susan's hair with gentle fingers. "I read your letter. I know exactly what you've been carrying all these years." They held each other in the soft light of Meridian, two women reclaiming a love that had been interrupted but never truly ended. Around them, the restaurant continued its evening rhythm, but they were suspended in a bubble of time where healing was possible, where second chances weren't just dreams but realities waiting to be claimed. When Susan finally pulled back, her face was streaked with tears but radiant with something that had been missing for decades. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice vulnerable in a way that no boardroom had ever heard. Anna smiled, the expression transforming her face from tired resignation to something approaching joy. "Now, we figure out what we're going to do with the rest of our lives. Together, if you want to. Separately, if that's what you need. But honestly, Susan, without any more lies or fears or other people's expectations getting in the way." Susan reached for the cream-coloured letter, folding it carefully and slipping it into her purse. "I wrote that letter 100 times in my head over the years. I never thought I'd have the courage to actually write it, much less have you read it. The universe has a funny way of making sure the right words find the right person," Anna said, thinking of the cosmic coincidence that had brought them back together. "Maybe it was time." "Maybe it was," Susan agreed, her hand finding Anna's again with the natural ease of recognition. "I have so many questions. About your life, about your children, about everything that happened after I left." "And I want to hear about your life too," Anna said. "The real story, not the sanitized version from business magazines. But Susan, we have time now. We have all the time in the world." The maître d' approached their table with discreet professionalism, clearly recognizing that this was more than a simple business dinner. "Ladies, would you care to order, or would you prefer more privacy for your conversation?" Susan looked at Anna, a question in her eyes. "Would you like to get out of here? Go somewhere we can really talk?" Anna nodded, her heart full of possibility. "I'd like that very much." As they stood to leave, Anna caught sight of herself in the restaurant's mirrored wall. The woman looking back at her was still tired, still wearing the accumulated weight of years of struggle and disappointment. But there was something new in her expression. Something that had been missing for so long she had forgotten what it felt like. Hope. Pure, undiluted, terrifying hope. Susan's car was waiting outside, a sleek black sedan with a driver who took their destination without comment or question. As they settled into the leather seats, Anna marvelled at the surreal nature of her evening. This morning she had been Anna Miller, the waitress, invisible and overlooked. Tonight she was Sarah Chen, the woman who had reclaimed the love of her life through nothing more than cosmic coincidence and 25 years of patient waiting. "Where would you like to go?" Susan asked, her voice tentative as if she were afraid of presuming too much too quickly. Anna thought for a moment, then smiled. Remember the coffee shop near campus? The one where we used to study for finals? Brewster's, Susan said immediately, the name coming to her as easily as breathing. Is it still there? I don't know, Anna admitted, but I'd like to find out. As the car pulled away from Meridian, carrying them toward their shared past and uncertain future, Anna felt the weight of the letter in her purse, the physical proof that some love stories were strong enough to survive even the most devastating endings. She looked at Susan, really looked at her, seeing both the successful businesswoman and the frightened college girl who had broken both their hearts rather than risk her family's disapproval. The road ahead was uncharted territory, full of complications and conversations that would need to happen, full of questions about how two people rebuilt a relationship after 25 years of separate lives. But as Susan's hand found hers in the darkness of the car, Anna knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The letter that had started it all was safely tucked away, its purpose fulfilled. The words that had been meant as a private confession had become the bridge that brought them back to each other. Proof that sometimes the universe conspired to give broken hearts exactly what they needed to heal. The coffee shop was gone, replaced by a trendy boutique selling artisanal soaps and overpriced candles. Susan stared through the car window at the storefront, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. 25 years had erased their sanctuary as efficiently as it had erased their connection, leaving nothing but the hollow ache of nostalgia and the bitter taste of time's relentless march forward. It's okay, Anna said softly, her fingers tightening around Susan's. We don't need that place anymore. We just needed each other. The driver cleared his throat discreetly. Ma'am, where would you like me to take you now? Susan looked at Anna, uncertainty flickering in her grey eyes. The confidence that had carried her through boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations seemed to evaporate when faced with the simple question of where to go next. This wasn't a merger or acquisition, wasn't something that could be solved with market analysis and strategic planning. This was two hearts trying to find their way back to each other across a chasm of lost time. My apartment isn't much, Anna said, reading the hesitation in Susan's expression. But it's private. We could talk without worrying about who might be watching or listening. Susan nodded, giving the driver Anna's address before settling back into the leather seat. The ride through the city took them from the gleaming towers of downtown to the more modest neighbourhoods where real life happened in smaller spaces with thinner walls. Susan watched the transformation through the window, noting how the buildings grew shorter and older, how the pristine sidewalks gave way to cracked concrete and struggling businesses. This was Anna's world, she realised. Not the rarefied atmosphere of five-star restaurants and private clubs, but the grinding reality of working-class existence. The woman beside her had spent decades serving people like Susan, people who saw service staff as invisible extensions of their own convenience rather than as human beings with their own stories and struggles. The guilt was crushing. While Susan had been building her empire, Anna had been raising children on a waitress's salary, had been working double shifts to pay rent and buy groceries and keep the lights on. The life Susan had chosen, the security she had prioritised over love, had come at Anna's expense as much as her own. Anna's building looked exactly as Susan had expected and feared it would. 3 stories of faded brick and peeling paint, windows that had seen better decades, a front door that required 3 different keys to unlock. But as Anna led her up the narrow stairs, Susan felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The electric anticipation of stepping into someone else's authentic life. The apartment itself was a study in making do with less. Furniture that had been purchased for function rather than form, walls decorated with photographs rather than paintings, a kitchen barely large enough for one person to move around comfortably. But it was clean and warm and filled with the accumulated evidence of a life fully lived, even if it hadn't been lived in luxury. "Can I get you something to drink?" Anna asked, her voice betraying the nervousness she felt at having Susan Pearl, billionaire extraordinaire, standing in her modest living room. "I have wine, or coffee, or—" She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious about the gap between what she could offer and what Susan was probably accustomed to. "Water is fine," Susan said, settling onto the couch with the careful movements of someone afraid of disturbing the delicate ecosystem of another person's carefully maintained space. Anna, this is lovely. It feels like a home. The compliment was genuine, tinged with the wistful recognition of someone who had traded warmth for wealth and was only now beginning to understand what she had lost in the transaction. Susan's penthouse was a monument to success. All clean lines and expensive art and views that cost more per month than Anna made in a year. But it had never felt like a home, had never held the lived-in comfort that radiated from every corner of this small apartment. Anna returned with 2 glasses of water and settled onto the opposite end of the couch, maintaining the careful distance of someone still uncertain about boundaries. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 women who had once known each other's every thought now struggling to find words that could bridge the enormous gap between their shared past and complicated present. "Tell me about your children," Susan said finally, her voice soft with genuine interest. "In your letter, you mentioned them, but I want to know everything." Anna's face softened as she spoke about Jason and Emma, her voice taking on the particular warmth that parents reserved for discussions of their offspring. She talked about Jason's struggles to find his path after college, about Emma's fierce independence and academic achievements, about the challenges of single motherhood and the quiet pride she took in raising 2 human beings who were kind and thoughtful, despite the financial struggles that had marked their childhood. Anna's story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary moments arrive disguised as ordinary coincidence. A forgotten letter on burgundy leather became the key that unlocked 25 years of silence, proving that true love doesn't fade with time. It simply waits for the right moment to resurface. What started as a routine shift for a tired waitress became a testament to the power of forgiveness, the courage to face buried truths, and the beautiful possibility that some connections transcend wealth, status, and the cruel passage of years. If you believe in second chances and the magic of unexpected reunions, share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for love to find its way home.